Good evening, everybody. Welcome, and welcome to those of you online, wherever you're calling from. It might be good morning to some of you calling from the other hemisphere. So, what a beautiful, I guess it's officially spring now. It seems like it's been spring here for a while, but since the clock's turned back, then, but we don't need the clocks turning back to remind us of the beauty of what happens here in Northern California. My favorite time of year, the winter and the spring, when the land comes to life and the streams start to sing and the blossoms bloom and the fragrance in the air. Did you notice the fragrance in the air? The grasses and the bay laurel and just the sweetness of the scents, the pollen. And so it's light. It's light now, which is a nice thing. Maybe you'll be a little more awake. Maybe, who knows? So happy to be here. Happy to be sharing some reflections this evening. I'm going to be giving reflections, both a meditation and a talk. Will be a talk around what we call Eco-Dharma, which is an integration of ecology and Buddhist teachings, and how Buddhist teachings, practices, meditation, perspectives shed light on what's happening to where we are as a species and as a planet, and ways we may hold what's happening ecologically, how we may meet it, how we may feel in response to it, how we might engage and act, and how it's impacting us, because it's impacting us all in different ways. Some of you, it's very forefront of your attention and experience, and some of you it might be more background, but there's nobody here that's not impacted by what's happening ecologically, because we are the earth and the earth is us and in us, and what happens to the earth happens to us and vice versa. So from my perspective and from an Eco-Dharma perspective, it's essential that we learn to integrate that into our way of being, our practice, our understanding, how we live. So I'm going to guide us in a meditation, and then we'll take a short break, and then I'll give some reflections. And if there's time, we'll have some discussion, time for questions. So I'm just curious, how many people are new here to Spirit Rock tonight? Just raise your hand. Okay, welcome. The cookies are really good at the break, just in case you're wondering. Like, if the meditation's like, it's like, well, the cookie coming later. So sorry for those of you online. I don't know. You can maybe get a snack. I don't know. No one's looking. Okay. So, so find a posture where you can sit relatively upright, relatively relaxed. Have your hands on your legs or in your lap. Rolling your shoulders a little bit. If you're online, you can withdraw your gaze from the screen and to turn the gaze inwards. And if you're in the room, you can also lower your gaze. You can close the eyes. But actually, before you do any of that stuff, I can invite you to actually look out the window, depending on where you're sitting, just to take in. And if you're at home, look out the window. If you have a window, if it's daylight, just to take in something of the natural world, which could also be a plant on your desk or these plants behind me, and just take in through the eyes. In this case, what we're seeing here is green, grasses, forest, sky, beauty. And notice how that touches you. What response in the heart arises. If I had my druthers, we'd be doing this outside, but here we are, we're inside, but we're very close to these beautiful hills. The earth is under us, the sky is always above us. We're always taking in the atmosphere. So, and then when you're ready, just tuning back to the living experience of your own body. Your body as a living expression of earth. That we literally come from the earth, made of the earth, of soil, nutrients from plants, from the oceans. So feeling your earth body, the earth expressing itself as your form, skin, flesh, bones. This is earth. You are part of the earth, aware of itself. And through our senses, the earth can know itself, can see itself, hear itself, feel itself, smell itself, touch itself. So just feeling into what it feels like to know your body as a landscape, as a terrain of earth. As you breathe, the breath is like wind, the winds that move through us, the breeze of the inhale, the wind of the exhale. Breathing in oxygen released from grasses, and trees, forests around us. Take in the exhale of the forest. And as all things are connected, as we inhale and take in oxygen, released from photosynthesizing life, that becomes transported through the body, through the heart, through the veins, through blood. Blood coursing through our body like streams. In the same way that the water that we drink falls from the sky down streams to lakes, and aquifers, and oceans. That rainwater, snowmelt becomes our blood, our sweat, tears. We are skin-bound ocean. We shed ocean tears. So sitting, aware of the aliveness of your body, sensing sensations, tingling, vibration, signals of aliveness, energy. You feel the warmth and the energy in the body comes from the fire and the energy of the sun. And that distant star keeping us alive as we eat plants. Know how to turn light into energy, into nutrients. Sensing this body elementally as earth, as water, ocean, as sunlight, energy, as air, wind, and as space. Allowing attention to dwell here in this body, sensory landscape of experience, sensation, touch, breath, sound, smell. And for the next part of the meditation, the rest of the meditation, I'm going to be guiding us in a embodied visualization. And if that guidance is helpful and follow along. And if that doesn't work for you for whatever reason, you can just continue sitting as we've been doing. And invite your imagination to broaden. And invite you into sensing into the vast oceans. 2/3 of the planet's surface covered in vast, blue, deep oceans. And these oceans have been around millions and millions and billions of years. Sensing into the vast, blue, clear oceans, teeming with life, teeming with marine life, abundant for millions of years. Visualizing that, sensing that, imagining yourself as the ocean, vast, wide, deep, blue, salty, healthy, vibrant. Going back into deep time. For much of your history, there was very little life in the ocean. And then a few hundred million years ago, life began to become more complex, gave birth to millions of life forms, trillions of beings, millions of species coming and going. Sensing that aliveness of ocean, healthy, vast. And then fast forwarding, sensing yourself as the ocean as you begin to be filled with a foreign substance called plastic, called microplastic. It seeps into every corner of the ocean, every living thing in the ocean. And the surfaces of your beautiful, clear blue waters are now full of plastic and trash and debris, and fishing nets and waste, sometimes choking islands. Sensing into that experience of that shift from health, vibrancy, to depletion of fish and marine life and whales, increasing debris. And then even more recently, sensing yourself as that ocean and beginning to see pockets of revival. Areas, vast areas now, coastline, protected from fishing, from extraction, beginning to regenerate, fish stocks beginning to multiply, the health returning. Feeling the presence of people concerned trying to clear the oceans of plastic, of debris. People picking out trash from the shoreline. Feeling your body warming. And yet seeds of hope. Movements to protect, clean, regenerate. And then moving onto land, these vast land masses. Now sensing yourself as forest, like the arboreal forests in the northern hemisphere, Canada, Russia, Siberia. Vast, vast, millions and millions and millions of acres. Beautiful arboreal forests. Sensing yourself as forests, tropical rainforests, old redwood forests. You've been on the surface of this earth for millions of years, tens of millions of years, growing, ebbing and flowing with ice ages, meteors. Sensing yourself as vast, healthy forest, vibrant, alive, diverse, full of life, full of birds, animals, untouched for millions of years, changing, fires, droughts, coming and going as part of the natural cycle. And then fast forwarding your experience of being forest to the last century. And you're beginning to feel the encroachment on your borders, encroachment of cutting, of clearing. And in more recent times, an increase in dehydration and drought, increase in temperatures, increase in vulnerability to bugs, pests, increased vulnerability to mass fires, vast fires, unprecedentedly hot. And you may also sense a very nascent movement in these things called humans to want to protect and care and steward. We want to regenerate, want to replant vast areas of forest to again nurture the health of the forests, preserve the old growths. Moving down from the forests into the plains, into the prairies, into the lowlands, vast grasslands, tall prairie grasses that covered much of North America. growing as far as the eye could see, stretching for hundreds, if not thousands of miles. Mass herds of buffalo, antelope, gazelle, elk, huge populations of animals walking through you as meadow, as prairie, as grasslands, healthy, vibrant, burning periodically, part of the cycles. Also living for millions of years in the constant dance with the landscape, changing conditions, weather, swaying in the wind, sweet scent of grasses. And then again, fast forwarding to recent times and the shifting, decimating of the animals that roam through your grasslands. And the turning of those wild prairies and open spaces and valleys into agriculture, into rows of corn, rows of wheat. And your soil, the land beginning to be poisoned, chemicals, nitrates. And now what replaced you as prairie and wild grasslands, rows of crops, far as the eye can see, monocrops, few animals, few insects, the sound of birds disappeared. And again, in small isolated pockets, there's a shift away from that monoculture, beginning seeds of reclaiming that biodiversity that was once inherent in that landscape. An invitation for the animals to return, predators, beavers, songbirds, nurturing of the soil, nurturing of complexity and diversity. Moving now down from the prairies, again to the shoreline, into that rich area of growth and life along the shoreline. 90% of all life in the oceans grows along the shoreline, just a few miles wide. Coral reefs, kelp groves, sensing yourself now as tropical, colorful, vibrant coral. So many shapes and forms and colors. Billions and billions of fish, all colors and shapes and sizes, swimming among you. Brain coral, the fans. Beautifully integral ecosystem, life, food, cycles. Also, having lived in these oceans for as far as the ocean has memory, deep time, and then in the last century, the presence of warming temperatures, warming seas, and the impact on the coral, bleaching the coral, cutting off the food source, both coral and all the fish that survive on the coral. And so turning these vast tropical, colorful playgrounds into graveyards. And again, you notice that there's pockets, people, incredibly creative, finding ways to regenerate coral reefs on old sunken boats, discarded metal, finding ways to keep the coral alive, to allow new coral to be birthed. Pockets, small pockets, but still pockets of hope, of aliveness. Wandering into the Sahara, into the vast deserts of Northern Africa, West Africa, and the borderlands, this ever-shifting dance of desert, forest, feeling the ancientness of this vast, sandy, hot desert, and the green spaces that border it, that it began receding with the heat and the drought. But also an incredible regeneration of that border, when the land in the desert has begun to be reclaimed and watered and tended in vast, vast stretches of what was once arid desert is now becoming fertile, fecund. Trees are growing, birds are returning, farmers are growing crops. Everywhere on this earth, this movement, this back and forth, the losses, and the creativity in response. As a young girl, teenage girl in Scandinavia, You may imagine yourself as her. Her name's Greta. She's so moved by the horrors that she's reading about. Global warming and loss of species. And so she sits by herself on a cold day on a Friday with a sign on strike, refusing to go to school. She wants society, adults to wake up. Sitting there alone for a long time, week after week. And at some point word gets around and this sparks a movement. And on a particular day, she's not sitting alone. There's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of school children across the world in 125 countries on strike on Friday, protesting the inaction by governments, corporations. No longer alone. And lastly, coming back to ourselves, sensing yourself. Maybe sensing yourself on your phone, reading the newspaper, looking at a screen. Maybe sitting in your house, alone, wondering, I'm so small. Problems are so big. Maybe feeling helpless, confused or angry, sad, worried about your children, grandchildren, the earth. And you come to a place like this, to a meeting like this, you connect with other people who are engaged, who care, who love the earth, who are committed to doing something. Just like Greta, you no longer feel alone. You realize you're part of a vast network, the Earth's immune system. It's waking up to what we're losing. It's waking up to grief. It's waking up to realizing we need to radically transform how we live. Close with some words from a meditator who comes here to Spirit Rock and who dedicated her life to climate action. Her name is China. The trees don't stop growing if half the forest is clear-cut. The waves still move upon the shore even as the ocean fills with plastic. The rivers flow as long as even a trickle of water moves down its length. The birds sing even in the smog. Children play even in war. So it must be for us, turning love into practice, step by step by step. So that is not the typical meditation that we normally do here at Spirit Rock. In fact, that was the first time I've led that meditation, but it came to me this morning. And I thought, why not? Why not? Since we are the earth and ocean and sky and everything from us in a way, why not visualize oneself as the ocean? Right? I think, and I'll talk more about this after the break, but I think partly the reason we are where we are is because we have an inability to feel ourselves as ocean and feel what it's like to be heating up and drowning in plastic, or to be a forest that's drying up and burning. Oh, actually, there's one part of that visualization I was going to have us visualize vast freshwater lake, like the Great Lakes up in the north. Vast. We'll just do that for a second. And visualize yourself as this vast lake, so big you can't see the other side of the lake. Some of you know these lakes, maybe from near where these lakes are. Imagine yourself as vast as Lake Erie, deep, clear, water pouring in from rain and snow. And then again, recently filling up with chemicals, with oils. So much oil that you catch on fire 14 times. The lake burns 14 times. There's so much pollution in the lake. Oil, chemicals. And then that wakes up people to realizing, oh, we were all living downstream. And so one of the instigators for the environmental movement was the burning of that lake. Surface of the lake, mind you, but the toxicity on the lake. And then, last 50 years, tremendous efforts to clean and to shift the pollution away. And now ecologists release sturgeon and other fish into the lake, and it's becoming beautiful and clear again, just like many rivers. I grew up in Newcastle, which is was a very industrial northern town, coal mining, shipbuilding, and the factories, and the river was just, when I grew up, was just this toxic slime. And now they've seen dolphins swim down it, 40 years of environmental efforts. So change is possible. I just had some feedback about the practice, one of which was, if it's okay that I share it, about they had a lot of resistance to it, and some reactivity, because they didn't want to feel the rising plastic in the body of their ocean, because why would we? Or why would we want to experience ourselves as a forest that's burning or drying or both, Why would we want to feel ourselves as our bones being bleached? No. But, that's kind of what we're living in, I was just chatting. I've been teaching all weekend different things, and I was teaching on, I was giving a nature talk on Sunday to Sangha Live, which is an organization based in Europe. And my dear friend Chris was on there, and she'd just come back from Southeast Asia, Thailand and other places, Borneo. And I kind of was excited to speak to her because I thought she would have all these wonderful things to share. And she did have some lovely things to share, but she was also heartbroken because sometimes when you travel and you get out of the cocoon of whatever cocoon you're in, we live in a bit of a cocoon here. She said she took a plane ride. She wanted to go see the orangutans in Borneo, one of the few remaining places that they survive. These beautiful, beautiful animals. And she had to take a plane ride. It was 2 hours north. It was a small plane, so low flying plane. And so for 2 hours, she flew over palm oil plantations, the entire 2 hours. And she was heartbroken. And then she went to visit the orangutans, who are in this tiny little preserved forest that's left, partly to preserve their habitat. And she got to see what the rainforest was like, what the tropical jungle was like before the palm oil plantations. And she was heartbroken. Just as if you go to any place where you see the impact, and you can see it everywhere, really. But sometimes it's more sharp contrast. But that's the reality we live in. When you buy your margarine, guess where it comes from, right? We don't see it, right? We live in this profoundly interconnected world, but mostly it's sort of out of sight. And when she was talking, it just really brought it home. Like we don't, in the kind of worlds that we live in, for the most part, we're not seeing the impact of our lifestyle, the impact of our actions. Not ours personally, but we're part of this web, this consumptive materialist economy that is ransacking the earth. And it's heartbreaking. And now we have an administration that doesn't believe in climate change. We're back to 2016, where the word climate change is being scrubbed from every government website. Any reference to global warming and to the negative impact of fossil fuels is being erased from every website. And you can get fired for speaking about climate change or ecological crisis or fossil fuel impacts. And so we're living in this very bizarre time where the world, is burning. Like the fires in LA are a great example of, the impact of climate change. And then this bizarre denial. So I want to speak to this tonight. And so I gave myself the whole day to think about this topic and to prepare a talk. And I don't usually give myself a whole day. I might give myself an hour or something. And so I wrote out a talk. And then I was like, I can't give that talk. I just can't give that talk. And so I worked on another talk, which I have in front of me. And I was chatting with some colleagues of mine. I was like, I don't know if I can give that talk either. in the biz, we call it Dharma Talk Dukkha. Dharma Talk Dukkha, where there's just this particular kind of dukkha. Maybe for anybody who does public presentations, or it's maybe a similar thing where you might be an expert in the field, but you're kind of working on it. Maybe I was going to do a whole slideshow today, and that didn't happen either. And it's just like you just kind of in the mess of it, and it usually it sort of resolves itself, and then you come to the class and it's all fine, and then today it didn't resolve itself. And I'm going to be candid, and I'm going to just speak from the heart here today, and not that I don't usually, but so I was writing, and I was working on the second talk, and it was a talk that it was sort of an iteration of something that I'd wrote. I could see echoes of the talk and things that I was pointing to from 2016, 2017. And I was like, oh, we're back here doing this again. And or maybe it was later, but anyhow, there was echoes from different times in the last 8 years. And I started to feel really depleted and hopeless, and because I was pointing to things from that were happening, 5-10 years ago, that showed seeds and signs of hope and optimism. Whether I was from, there's a movement in corporations to, be more sustainable and commit more resources to that, and to be more greenwashing or not, and to defund. There's this massive, I forget the word, what it's called, when you not defund, deinvesting in the fossil fuel industry. It's 40 trillion, 40 trillion or billion. A lot of dollars were committed to pulled out of investment into fossil fuels. And then we see in this administration and what's happening around it, where a lot of those promises are being walked back on. And of course, they were always just promises, because mostly they weren't actually enacted anyway. But at least there was a momentum of, oh, we're taking this climate crisis seriously. We had the Paris Accord. We had all kinds of things. And as I was working and reflecting, it's like, oh, and so much of that is actually just castles in the sky, And it's not easy to let that in, And things are only getting worse, The climate crisis, that's just the nature of it, snowballing, tipping points, etc. Not going away, but it's not just not going away, it's getting worse, and it's having more impact. So not easy to be with, not easy to let in, And so, as I mentioned at the beginning of this class, in this talk is about Eco-Dharma, right? The interface of Dharma and deep ecology. And how does the Dharma, this practice of wisdom and awakening, what does that have to bear to this this immense issue that is, the issue of our times, and it will be the issue of our children's times, and it will be the issue of our grandchildren's times. And that's a great question, What does our practice of mindfulness, of meditation, of compassion, of wisdom, what does that have to bring to bear to these both global and um, massive realities, but also a very intimate day-to-day reality. I was just out in Point Reyes talking to a realtor who was talking about how hard it is now to get insurance, to get house insurance. And I'm sure probably many of you are like, yeah, we got ours canceled, or we can't renew and we have to go through CAL, whatever it is, to get fire insurance. Who are the most informed? If you want to know who's the most informed about what's happening in the macro sphere, whether it's climate or economy, right? It's not environmentalists. It's the insurance industry and it's the military. The military have, far-sightedness to what's coming down the pipe with climate migration and the ecological instability that's going to be happening. Right? And the insurance company, you bet they know what's coming down the pipe. That's why they're pulling out of California and pulling out of all kinds of places. So, and here we are. And here we are, and I wish it was still daylight because I was going to say, and it's a beautiful spring day. It's a beautiful spring day here in Northern California. And it's dazzlingly beautiful. I was leading a day long in the headlands, the Marin Headlands on the coast here, just north of the Golden Gate Bridge on Friday, sitting out all day, gazing at the ocean, surrounded by wildflowers, and it's beautiful to bathe in nature's beauty, and it's abundant and it's fecund and yet, I was teaching here in February, I think, early February. And it was also a beautiful spring day, even though it wasn't spring. It's supposed to be rainy, cloudy, and cold. But no, it was like today. It was a beautiful, green, spring-like day. The flowers had already started coming out. The blossoms were starting to come out. And I was commenting on that, and I sent people out to do some walking meditation and to enjoy the nature. And one person came back and said, "It's not supposed to be spring. It's not spring, it's winter. Why are we having spring in winter?" You know? And I said, "You're right. It is still winter. And I mean, winters are sort of mild here anyway, but there's usually more rain and whatnot. And I said, and it doesn't deny the fact that it's still beautiful, you know? The moon rising during fire season is often this gorgeous crimson red. You notice that? The pollution in the air makes this moonrise spectacular, makes the sunrise and sunset spectacular. It's still beautiful, even though it's terrifying. Or the smog, even. And so this is the paradox we live in. And that's really what I want to speak to today. So the talk that I wrote, I can lay out 7 things that I think are important in this sort of Eco-Dharma orientation, and I'll speak to some of them tonight. I call them the 7 R's, and the first is to reacquaint ourselves with the earth, to reestablish an intimate connection with the earth, to go outside, go outside, go outside, to put down our phones, to put down our thoughts and conversations, and just to be immerse yourself in a garden, in a park, in a tree-lined boulevard, in a stream, and along the ocean, and we were surrounded by natural beauty here, and to come into an intimate sensory connection with nature and all of its beauty and diversity and mystery and wondrousness. Because if we don't do that, then our understanding of the earth and ecosystems and forests and birds and flowers and pollinators is just a concept. And we're not moved very strongly by concepts. And we can be, but we're more moved by the heart, by love, by beauty. My work, my Awaken the Wild work, which is my nature meditation work, is the underlying teaching for that work is we protect what we love. We protect what we love. So this is a poem from Rosemary Watola Trummer, beautiful nature poet and a meditator. She says, when everything is field, and I like this because the fields right now are so exquisite and so expressive of what we love about nature. She says, again, I fall in love with the field as if for the first time I ever saw a pair of geese land there and waddle through tall, dry grass. The first time I ever watched it transform from drab ochre to brilliant green, just like these hills. The first time I ever felt its spaciousness and how it becomes a basin for light. What a great frame. Basin for light. I love that. Every day I fall in love again with the field. Every day I marvel that there are new ways to fall in love. Once I didn't know how intimate it was, this relationship to land. Now I know it is the truest thing. Inevitable, this love affair with color, texture, change, scent, sound of grass moving against grass. Inevitable, the love that rises out of dew and frost, out of vastness and wholeness, out of loss, and it reteaches me what it is to love and be loved. It teaches me what it is to love and be loved. And I love this last line because, I'm talking about, reacquainting ourselves with the earth and to kindling that heartful connection. And often we can feel affection, love, tenderness, appreciation, gratitude, affection for, and the returning songbirds, and maybe they're not returning songbirds, but they're starting to sing the multi-colored crowned song sparrows and the warblers and the orioles and all kinds of things. And then she says, teaches me what it is to love and be loved. And that's also, I think, a very important thing that we can sometimes go out into nature and we can feel love for the forest and the streams and the whatever it is that we're seeing, the fawns, and then we can also feel the love that's coming from the earth. From the earth. We're given to so much sunlight and water and air and fragrance and beauty and color. And it's like sometimes we can see that, the earth is expressing love. Love. Anybody feel that? Anybody feel loved by the earth at times? Some. Yeah, I've seen lots of nodding heads. Yeah, good. Yeah, because we are. We wouldn't be here if we weren't. If it wasn't for love, we wouldn't be here. And so when we kindle the heart, we're much more likely, just as we take care of our things that, our loved ones, our children, our beloveds, our family, friends, right? When we love, we protect, we take care of, right? When that which is getting hurt, we want to step in, we want to protect. Right? So let yourself fall senselessly in love with this earth, because that is what's going to be the fuel to protect, to steward. but it comes at a risk, right? What's the risk? What's the risk of falling head over heels in love? It's vulnerable. It's vulnerable, right? Because the heart's open, right? Oh, it's open, you know. It's sensitive. This is a harsh world. Nature's harsh. And when they're open, and then when that which is harmed or we get harmed in some way, the heart, feels deep pain, closes. You know. Sometimes it's too heartbreaking to open to the pain of the world because it's too much for this little heart. And so the second of the R's is to recognize what's at risk, to recognize what we're losing. And that meditation was really an invitation to feel what it's like to be a coral reef that's bleaching and dying. Right? That's what we're losing. We're losing the fabric of what supports life in the oceans. Right? If anybody snorkeled over coral reefs or dived, right? It's like it's a miracle. It's like this is wonderful. There's this place I used to go to in Thailand, which is now sadly been, as far as I can tell, last time I went was just destroyed. This was an island. And it was just one massive coral reef island. And you didn't even have to go in. You just bent over, put your mask on, stick your head in the water, and it was like, oh my God, it was just like right there. It's just this amazing coral. And I went back a few years ago and I just saw this desert of broken coral bleached bones. It was heartbreaking. And but we have to, this is where the courage of our practice, I think of mindfulness and compassion, which are the two central qualities we cultivate on the path, and also the two central qualities we need in life, to meet ourselves, to meet each other, to meet suffering. The mindfulness is bearing witness. We're recognizing what's happening. We are open to learning about what we're losing, what's at threat. And it's hard and it takes courage. Mindfulness takes courage. It's easier to just put Netflix on than hear what's going on in Borneo and those wretched palm oil plantations. It's hard. It's hard to bear. Dukkha, the suffering that the Buddha pointed to, the translation I like the most is difficult to bear. Difficult to bear. It is difficult to bear what's happening in the world ecologically. It is brutalizing because we love this earth. I keep hearing about the monarch butterflies. I remember I teach down in Esalen and Big Sur. I've been going there for 20 some years. And in the winter, there'd just be tens of thousands of monarch butterflies flying from Mexico up the coast, west coast, and they'd find a particular tree. Sometimes it was a Douglas fir, sometimes it was a eucalyptus, and sometimes like big branches would break off the tree because the butterflies were so thick and heavy, they would actually make tree limbs fall off. It was kind of inconceivable because the butterfly is almost weightless. And there's these clouds of butterflies. And it takes 3 generations of butterflies to get from Mexico to Northern California. 3 generations. Just that is just wild. So the grandmother sets off in Mexico, gives birth to the mother and father, and probably, I don't know, maybe San Diego, and then they take off, and they make it to San Luis Obispo, and they give birth to the children, who then make it to northern, further up the coast. Somehow they know that wisdom. It takes one generation to go back. They go first class or something. I don't know what they do. I don't know. And now when I go, I saw one when I was there last weekend. I saw one. So one. I mean, maybe it wasn't the right time of year. I don't exactly know when the peak of the migrations, but I'm pretty sure they were there in winter, and they get cold in winters. They stay. They can't fly above 55 degrees, under 55 degrees, and it's just so I choose not to think about that because it's too heartbreaking. But when I let it in, it's like, oh, those butterflies, these gorgeous monarch butterflies, these big amber golden butterflies, incredibly beautiful patterns. Innocent, innocent life, that for whatever reason no longer have the conditions to support life and migration. And so they're now, were close to being put on in the endangered species. And so the third thing that we have to do is reopen the heart to compassion, because it's compassion that allows us to feel the pain and the suffering of others, of life around us. And it's compassion, this quality of great compassion, that can allow us to kind of stand in the midst of it, to bear with, right? Is to feel the grief, feel the sadness, feel the loss. It's a poem from Mary Oliver, who's usually writing about the beauty of nature, but she's being a nature lover. She also writes about what we're speaking to here. She says, "Here's a story to break your heart. Are you willing? This winter the loons came to our harbor and died one by one of nothing we could see. A friend told me of one on the shore that lifted its head and opened the elegant beak and cried out in the long, sweet savoring of its life, which, if you have heard it, you know is a sacred thing, and for which, if you have not heard it, you had better hurry to where they still sing. And believe me, tell no one exactly where that is." The next morning, this loon, speckled and iridescent, and with a plan to fly home to some hidden lake, was dead on the shore. I tell you this to break your heart, by which I mean only that it break open and never close again to the rest of the world. Right? The heart doesn't break. We think of break as like wrong, but I love the way she reframes that. Break open. Break open. So a heart becomes tender and tenderized, right? And it's quite vulnerable to let your heart be tenderized, right? And if you're not comfortable with that, which most of us haven't been trained or taught about that, I would say particularly as men, but not just men, I think it's cultural also. Haven't been trained how to be okay in the tenderness, the tenderizing of the heart, the vulnerability. And so what do? We close it down because it's safer, it's less overwhelming. It means I can get on with my life. But what happens when we close down the grief, when we close down the sadness, when we close down the loss, right? If you think of this as like like a gate or something, right? We close down the pain, closes down the heart. So when you go out into the meadow or your favorite, stream or, wildflower place or whatever it is, and you go, I know it's beautiful, but I just don't feel it. I can see that it's as beautiful as it was last year, but I kind of feel a bit numb. I feel a bit frozen. You ever had that experience where you go somewhere, you know it's beautiful, but you just can't kind of feel it? Is there something wrong with me? Of course, emotions come and go, but when we close down to this pain, to the suffering, to the loss, to the grief, we risk numbing the heart. This is from Joanna Macy. She says, of all the dangers we face, from climate chaos to nuclear war, none is so great as the deadening of the heart. Right? Because there's a lot of stuff happening. There's always a lot of stuff happening, both beautiful and tragic in this world, and it will probably always be that way. But the numbing of the heart, she's pointing to, which numbs responsiveness, is a greater threat. Because if we're numb and numbed out, and of course we know modern culture excels at numbing us out. Whatever your numbing of choice is, Oh, look, puppies. Oh no, squirrels. Oh no, whales jumping. Oh no, or whatever it is. I mean, just how much we're numbed, right? TV, Netflix, or whatever it is, sports, or it doesn't matter. It's like, it's not the thing itself. None of those things are a problem in themselves, but the collective sort of, we're in a trance. When the Kardashians have, I don't know, 195 million followers on whatever it is, I'm like, there's something wrong with this planet, you know. Hmm. So this beautiful line from poet Adrienne Rich. She writes, there must be those among whom we can sit down and weep. There must be those among whom we can sit down with and weep and still be counted as warriors. And so for Joanna Macy, who's just been this amazing, inspiring Buddhist teacher and activist, she first turned her attention to the threat of nuclear devastation in the 60s and the 70s, and did a lot of nuclear advocacy work and sitting outside of these nuclear power stations and protesting and letting herself feel the terror and the grief of what could happen, and what does happen at Chernobyl. She spent a lot of time working with people around Chernobyl. But she turned that grief and that fear into action, into advocacy. And she's a beautiful warrior who weeps and laughs daily. She's so alive. I love her aliveness. I remember teaching with her, and we were talking about equanimity. She says, if equanimity means you're just all sort of quiet and it's all stuff, like, no, I'm not equanimous. I care, I love, I'm passionate. And it was so beautiful. And I know she's a deep Buddhist scholar. She doesn't diss equanimity, but equanimity, if it's used to suppress, which is called bypassing, not equanimity. Equanimity is standing in the fire and you still feel fully. So reopening the heart to compassion. So I was wondering about whether I'll play this, but I think I will. So to invite this quality in, again, to make this real, right? So I'm from England, and since 1970, we've lost 70% of the bird population. It's like 40 to 50 million birds. And England's sort of renowned for its beautiful bird song. It's, for some reason, it's just have a particular, I don't know, profuse songbird culture. And it's exquisite. I go visit my parents there, and it's just exquisite. It's still exquisite, even with that loss. And so I'm a great lover of songbirds and how they comfort us, in the morning. listening. I have Buick's wrens outside my house and bush tits, and I came across this story that brings this home in a rather painful way. These biologists, one of the greatest places where there's greatest ecological loss right now is in Hawaii, and losing a lot of their endemic species. And they were recording this call of a male Kauai o'o bird. And I'm going to play a little bit of it if we can, Aaron. And I'm assuming we will be able to hear this on Zoom too. Yeah. So this male is mostly who sing the longest, loudest songs. He's singing, as birds do. They're calling in a mate. Right? He's sitting on a branch. There's a video of this bird singing, calling for a mate. And they do a call and response song, which we're not hearing this. We're just hearing the male. And there's no female response because this is the last male bird and there's no female birds left. So it's calling for a mate that will never come. And you put a hand on your heart, take a few deep breaths. Again, these words from Edge and Rich. There must be those among whom we can sit down and weep and still be counted as warriors. So I play that song because it's heart opening. It's heartbreaking, but it's heart opening. Just as Joanna Macy was saying, um, as she said, I tell you this to break your heart, by which I mean only that it break open and never close again to the rest of the world. Right? So, I think often, we're inundated with information and often overwhelming information, whether it's political, social, economic, environmental. And it feels really important to bring that ecological information crisis overwhelm down to the particular, right? This bird, this tree, this endangered flower, this newt that's endangered, this whatever it is. So the fourth R, and I'll just pause there for a second. So whatever's here for you, there's a lot gets stirred when I play this beautiful song. Just noticing how you are meeting this moment, how you're meeting this tenderness or this emotion or whatever's here. Because this is the practice of courage, of being willing to be present, to be open, to feel, to receive, to welcome what's here. As Rumi said, welcome and entertain the visitors, even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honorably. They may be clearing you out for some new delight. So the fourth R is to reconnect with others. It's hard to hold this alone. We're not ultimately alone, but we can feel alone, and we can certainly feel lonely. And it feels imperative that however we're meeting the ecological reality that we're living in, that we do so with others in community, in connection, in solidarity, however that is. Bell Hooks writes, rarely if ever are any of us healed in isolation. Healing is an act of communion. And so because the scale of what we're facing is immense, it feels essential that we find like-minded people, just like we come here. Like I know many of you are listening to this at home alone, and it's you're having your own experience, but when we come here in person, right? If you were listening to this talk and this bird song alone, that would have a particular feeling, right? When we have a collective shared experience, there's often a sense that we're holding it together, but we're holding each other together. It's why we come together. It's why we need to come together more and more. I was just having a long conversation while I was trying to work on my Dharma talk, but I was having a much more interesting conversation with the person who sat at my table when I was working outside about this need for connection and to come together. And we were just sort of sharing that the next wave of is going to be us learning how to come together again post-pandemic, which we've lost the art of. I just saw an alarming statistic. It was a bar graph of, typical days or hours we spend at home, 2018, 2019, it was like here. And then 2021, 2022 it was like here. It's like the amount of time we spend alone at home, not healthy, not healthy. We need to also be in community. And again, going back to Joanna Macy, one of the things I love when I went over to her house one day for tea, and a question I ask her often, but I particularly asked her this question today of like, how does she not give up in despair? Because she's so at the cutting edge of the ecological crisis, and she says, because I'm in community and I act with others. And it says it doesn't matter if you do something and fail. What matters is you come together and act. That's what matters. There's a book by Paul Hawken he wrote some years ago called Blessed Unrest. Paul's a deep thinker, environmentalist. And he has a sort of insatiable, curious mind. And at some point, he's in touch with all these really good environmental organizations, and a lot of them. And he began to wonder, like, well, how many organizations are involved in taking care of people, community, and planet? So he got a team together and started tracking, doing research on how many organizations around the world are engaged in doing good work for people and species and the planet. And he got up to 1.7 million organizations. 1.7 million organizations. He said, when he gave his book talk, and he had the credits rolling of these organizations. And I think he said it was something like it would take like 35 days for you to sit there and watch. I mean, just one line of an organization, just one line, like Sierra Club, Greenpeace, Oxfam. 35 days, 1.7 million organizations around the world. And probably if you averaged, maybe there's, I don't know, an average of 10 people in those organizations. There's 170 million people doing beautiful work to care for people, for species and planet. Right? So, again, it's important that we don't feel alone because we're not alone. And we share common humanity, we share common pain about what's happening. The fifth R, these are imminently unforgettable. I'm not sure why I came up with the R's because anyhow, it just is. So the fifth is to reimagine possibility. Reimagine possibility in the human potential to act and the human potential to care. And that can feel a little hard to do right now. We can feel a little demoralized at humanity's potential because we're seeing a lot of human potential that's not very caring for people or planet. I remember teaching an Earth Day here at Spirit Rock when we used to have a little trailer over there before this beautiful hall was built. And we invited Paul Hawken to Earth Day. And he was writing a book on carbon, which he ended up not finishing, but he's now rewriting it, reimagining carbon. And he said just sort of randomly that if we actually gathered all the carbon molecules in the world, I don't understand this. It's a bit like telling me I'm 99% space. He said if you gather all the molecules, put them into a dense ball, they would fit in San Geronimo Valley. Doesn't quite make sense to me. But anyhow, he was just saying, he was like, the demonization of carbon, which is the most creative molecule in the universe, or atom or element, or whatever it is, and it's all workable. It's workable. Anyhow, so he said this line that always stay with me. He said, the problem with the way humans are dealing with the ecological crisis is it's a failure of imagination that we failure of imagination to imagine the unimaginable. Because right now, the unimaginable is imagining us finding a way out of the polycrisis and the multiplicity of ecological crises. It seems almost insurmountable, right? The plastic in the ocean, rising temperatures, species loss. But if you look to human history, there's been amazing breakthroughs and developments, all throughout history of people coming together. Probably one of the biggest ones was the coming together of banning CFCs. Anybody remember CFCs? Chlorofluorocarbons that were created a hole in the ozone over Australia, 50,000 miles wide or something, or circumference, so big. And almost 200 countries came together and banned CFCs, and now that ozone is shrinking. I'm not sure it's still there, but it's radically shrinking. So we can do this. Well, I should say we can come together. So similarly, this amazing, flourishing of environmental protection in the late 60s, early 70s, Clean Air Act, Clear Water Act, Endangered Species Act. And there's long lists of species who have been taken off the list because their numbers of thriving gray wolf, bald eagle, humpback whale, California condor, peregrine falcon, blue whale, Florida manatee, gray whale, grizzly bear, red wolf, Steller sea lion, and on and on. That's just the megafauna. American crocodile. We can come together in wise and compassionate ways and make a difference. I was just looking up, somewhat tangentially, eating habits. There's shockingly amount to say there's 13 million vegans in America. 13 million. It's kind of astounding given how much red meat we eat. 10% of the American population is now vegetarian, up from 5% in 2018. That's a massive change, right? That's, yeah, I don't know, 15, 20 million people becoming vegetarian, not eating animals, which are one of the biggest contributions to climate change. Change happens slowly, maybe too slow, but slowly. So, and then the last R's, and I'm sort of running out of time here. The 6 is re-inspiring ourselves to act, to engage. Spirit Rock's in the process of developing an Eco-Dharma program, and there'll be many programs coming down the pipeline that you'll be hearing about in the future, where we're going to be exploring some of these themes, including a lecture series and things. And I don't have too much time to go into this, but ways that we engage, ways that we get involved, ways that we act, both personally, politically, collectively. And of course, this is one of the hardest things. Well, what do I do? The problem seems so massive, you know. Someone told me 20 years ago I should recycle. That will save the environmental crisis. You know, I should buy an electric car like a Tesla. Oops. So, we can make change personally, but of course we know that really where the change happens is politically, economically, on a macro scale. And so, thinking about ways that you can engage, connecting with organizations that are engaging. There's so many great organizations. That quote from China, she works for 350.org. And so many good environmental organizations. I don't need to list them. You probably know them. You're probably involved with them. But, to think about, as if when the heart is touched, and to think about what is it that touches your heart, and what is it your heart wants to respond in response to that pain and grief. I was a student. I was in teaching a retreat in Colorado, and she's a lover of birds, and she lived in downtown Denver, and she ripped out her garden and put in all these local plants and pollinating plants, and she created a great little oasis in the sprawl of Denver to support pollinators and insects and flies and birds. Like, that was one thing she could do. Like, I've got a garden. Well, let's make it, one little stepping stone through this vast concrete jungle. Joanna Macy has beautiful teachings. Her work, the school, the work that reconnects. She has this teaching on three ways we can engage in this area, which she calls the Great Turning: holding actions, engaging alternative structures, and transformation of consciousness. What we're doing here is transforming consciousness. My work, my nature work, which is helping us to see ourselves as Earth, I feel like is a slow but important piece of environmental activism. And then lastly, the 7th R is for resilience. right? This is a lifelong process we're involved in, and so we have to stay sustainable. And in that, we go back to the very beginning from where we started, which is to reacquaint ourselves with the earth, to go outside, to breathe the morning air, to listen to songbirds, to drink in beauty, to swim in the ocean, to saturate yourselves, to rest, to laugh, to come together, community. Like, what supports you? What allows you to stay resilient? Right? For me, I have to go outside every day. That's my mental health medicine. Doctors are now prescribing nature to teens and adults with anxiety and depression because it makes us, we feel better. We feel nourished. We feel grounded. So, anyhow, there's some reflections for you about this theme. I'll just leave you with this question, which is a question that I live with and a question I offer my teachers and students that I work with. And it's a question that's nice to take when you go out on your next nature walk, which will hopefully be tomorrow, or you're on your night walk looking at the stars and the moon on the land here. And the question is, how does the earth wish to move through me? How does the earth wish to move through me in response to where we are ecologically? How does the earth wish to move through? And it might be just like, oh, I want you to water your garden. I want you to plant wildflower seeds. I want you to plant trees. I want you to use some of your resources and give to people who are protecting the rainforest and the indigenous people protecting the rainforest. I want you to fly less. I want you to write more to your senator. I want you to go down to their offices in Sacramento and raise hell about why they're not standing up to what's going on right now in Washington, or whatever it is. But listen, how does the heart wish to move through you? Oh, I want to take my kids outside. I want them to fall in love and become earth lovers and advocates. Oh, I want to take myself out to nourish myself and then let the answer come from there. There's no right answer. But we are the earth, and the earth is moving through us. And how can we channel the earth moving through this in a way that's protecting our mother and our home? And so with that, I will just come into a moment of silence. Let's just let the words settle for a second. Sensing the earth within you. Sensing your heart and any love you may feel for the earth. Or particular tree, bird, animal, flower, insect, dragonfly, western bluebird. And then hold that question, how is the earth moving through me? How does the earth wish to move through me? If I'm part of the earth's immune system, how do I take care of myself, the earth? Thank you for your patience and presence. I talked a lot longer than I meant to, so and hope these words were helpful, and go well and take care of each other, and enjoy this beautiful spring. Thank you. Take care.